Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Inside Scoop podcast. You should know me by now, but I'm Julian Lockhart. If you don't, nice to meet you. Hope everyone's doing well. It's Tuesday morning, early, while we are recording this, and I was like, well, I got to get the content out to you guys. We have a huge recap of Week One of college football. I am stoked to talk about Week One results, my takeaways, my game recaps. As we had a long weekend of college football. Started up on Thursday. We had a handful of great games. And then Friday we had some. I can't really lie. I didn't really watch too much on Friday. Saturday, of course, was the big day. But then Sunday night and Monday night we also had one matchup each night. That was really good. So we had a good time. So we're gonna get into it. So I picked a handful of games that I want to recap from Thursday. We're not gonna talk much about Friday, but overall it was a phenomenal first weekend. Not counting week zero. I know Florida State played week zero, and that was kind of the only notable matchup, and actually ended up losing. Um, and I think we'll get to Florida State as well, because if by the time you're watching this, if you're an avid college football fan, you'll know that Florida State's off to a rough start. Anyway, so you guys know I'm from Minnesota. If you don't, now you know. I'm a Gopher fan, and I'm a St. Thomas Tommy alum. So we're going to cover a lot of Tommy and Gopher football. So starting with the Gophers, so they host North Carolina out of the ACC. And unfortunately, they ended up losing 19-17. There's two missed field goal attempts for the Gophers that game, which was a little surprising. Their kicker is an all-conference level player. He missed a 27-yard chip shot for his first attempt earlier in the game, and then he missed, I think it was like a 45 or a 47 game winner. I mean, just thinking about, if he made even one of those, it would be a different result. I guess for the Gophers, my overall take for the Gophers week one, I mean, I feel like they just kind of look like just a mid-tier team. Unfortunately, nothing special. I mean, they had special moments. I think it was rough. Their big-time running back, Darius Taylor, was out. So yeah, they resort to backups. I think if he's in, it might be a different story. Even though they ran the ball pretty well with their backup, I felt like they had a pretty high average of like 5 yards a carry, I would say. So like a pretty efficient run game. Passing wise, I feel like they just didn't really give, their top end receiver. I think Jackson's his last name. They didn't really give him any opportunities. Like he's kind of their big guy. Like go make a big play, and they didn't really do that for him. Max Brosmer FCS transfer, from New Hampshire a season ago. It's a whole different ball game, right? If you're playing FCS Division One to not only FBS, but Big Ten football, it's a different game. I think if you give him time to transition, get comfortable a little bit more, I think he should improve. But again, at the same time, I think we all kind of know he's not going to be, a prime Tanner Morgan like he once was a few years back. For UNC, Omarion Hampton was listed as a preseason first-team All-American. He looked great. He did not disappoint. I think he showed he's truly one of the best running backs in the country. I think Minnesota did a good job to contain him, and he, didn't overall go too crazy. But he had a number of solid runs. I don't think he saw the end zone, but he had a great game. It was tough for the North Carolina Tar Heels. Their starting quarterback went down. Thoughts and prayers to him and his family for a speedy recovery. I know he was carted off the field, and it looked like a knee injury, which, if you know in football, that's like the worst injury to have. Anyway, my overall take, I mean, it was an okay game. Lots of field goal kicking, not too much offensive action. I think both teams, at best, will probably finish at 500 this season. The next game, I'm really excited to talk about this one. North Dakota State. Oh, my goodness, I just bumped my camera. Ah, shit. North Dakota State at Colorado. You have one of the best teams in FCS versus, well, a Big 12 team that has a lot of hype. It was a great game. I feel like I found myself watching this more than the Gopher game. It sucked that they were both kind of on at the same time, but it is what it is. Uh, well, Colorado's offense is explosive. Um, they kind of had a repeat of last year's first game. Last year they played Texas Christian University, which at that point they were coming off of a national championship running up season, and they go down to Texas, and they not only beat them, but like Shador Sanders threw for like 500 yards, and that was kind of similar. The Colorado Buffaloes, Shador Sanders had over 400 yards. He had 4 touchdowns, a big passing game for Colorado. Travis Hunter, they're kind of big all around, all purpose guy. The cornerback, wide receiver had a phenomenal game, 3 receiving touchdowns, a couple spectacular catches. But I also think NDSU kind of showed that like, hey, we can compete with a lot of schools. They go down to Colorado on the road. They were, I think, maybe like plus 9.5. So, and they covered it. The final score was 31-26 in favor of the Buffaloes. But NDSU, they made it a competitive game, especially in their first half. Their offense was really rolling. Defensively, I think it's tough, especially like with the defensive backs. I think it's difficult to have to defend, a lot of power for Big 12 types of, level of wide receivers. I feel like with those FCS programs, you can develop a lot of like big boys in the trenches, like the offense and defensive line, and maybe has some good linebackers. But I just feel like for safeties and other DBs, it's difficult to really get a lot of those big time athletes out of high school or to transfer there. I feel like a lot of the really good corners and safeties go to play Power 4 football versus I feel like a lot of schools can have a good offensive line. Anyway, I think my overall take, Colorado looked great against an FCS school. Defense was a little shaky. I'd be curious to see how they do against the Big 12 now. They do not have an easy schedule. Although they had a great game statistically, I think they have a lot of things to work on. However, I think Shador Sanders, Jimmy Horn, that other wide receiver, and and Travis Hunter are the real deal. But also for NDSU, I mean, a good game. A loss is a loss, but it was kind of like, well, what did you expect? I think they should still be one of the favorites to win the FCS National Championship this season. So the third and final game, we're going to talk about my St. Thomas Tommies. So they played on Thursday night. They had another late night game at O'Shaughnessy Stadium in St. Paul. They hosted University of Sioux Falls out of South Dakota. And, I thought the Tommies would do better. I was a little shocked, a little upset with the outcome of the game. Just to say it was a prime start for the Tommies. They get an interception on the first defensive drive, and then they go down and score a touchdown for their first offensive drive, and they're up 7-0. And I'm like, that's like literally a perfect start. That's like a perfect start to me. And unfortunately, they just kind of fell apart after that. The offense really couldn't get anything going, and the defense could only do so much to contain. And it was an interesting game. Honestly, I kind of expected it would have been, I don't want to say a cakewalk, but it should have been a win, right? You're at home, you're playing a Division II team, and by no means is Sioux Falls a great Division II program. And unfortunately, you had a great start, but you just couldn't finish. And it was a tough loss. St. Thomas goes down. I was reading up. They had 31 home winning streaks. They've won 31 consecutive home games. That goes back to their Division III era. It goes back to like December of 2016. That's a long fucking time. I mean, that's literally almost 8 years. Like, we're in September now. It's like 7 years and like 9 months of home wins. Like, I was a sophomore in high school, and now I'm like well out of college. That is just so crazy to me. And records are meant to be broken, streaks are meant to be ended. Um, I just didn't think it was going to come against Sioux Falls in their home opener. They have to host Northern Iowa next Saturday. It should be a fun game. Hopefully, they learn from their mistakes and they can play a better game. UNI is going to come to play, and hopefully, they can bounce back and get a home win there. Now let's go to Saturday. Saturday has a lot of the big games. I'm going to start with Georgia Clemson. Georgia, number one team in the country, taking on number 14, the Clemson Tigers, at a nice little ACC SEC battle. And I just want to say Georgia took a little bit of time for them to settle in, but once they did, they were so dominant. They had four out of their five first possessions in the second half were touchdowns. They played amazing right out the gate in the second half. Carson Beck looked like a Heisman contender. He threw for well over, what was it? I think he threw 300 yards. Had a couple passing touchdowns, no interceptions. Georgia's defense, I think, most importantly, did great. They only allowed, I think, less than 200 total yards of offense, which is pretty incredible. They were delivering big hits on Klubnik, the Clemson quarterback. They weren't, I think they did an okay job containing the run, but overall keeping Clemson out of the red zone, which was huge. I think it was a big home win to see them play a top 15 opponent and bring them down like that. 34-3 was the final score. A huge win for the Bulldogs. Penn State goes to West Virginia, and I know West Virginia brought a great crowd. Like, they were super pumped for this game. I know people kind of thought, like, oh, put West Virginia on upset alert. And they were the team receiving top 25 votes. So this is a good football program. But Penn State comes in at number 8 in the country. One of the more experienced quarterbacks, Drew Aller, a high-level running back, Nicholas Singleton, and a stellar defense for the Nittany Lions. And Penn State, they brought it to them. Elite was their defense was elite. Drew Aller honestly looked like one of the better quarterbacks in the Big Ten. Singleton had a big game with 100 yards on the ground and a touchdown. Harrison Wallace led receiving, 5 catches for over 100 yards and a pair of touchdowns. It was a big road win, I think, for Penn State. So they start out hot 1-0, and then they have now 2 home game kind of gimmies, as I like to call them, basically 2 kind of easy wins. So Penn State off to a good start. For West Virginia, you know what, it was not a great performance. Unfortunately, games like this aren't really going to benefit you towards your argument for being top 25 right now. But again, hopefully they'll continue to win, once it comes to conference play. Virginia Tech Vanderbilt. So this matchup didn't really host a ranked team. Virginia Tech has been kind of had some speculation of maybe being top 25. One of the better teams in the ACC. And right now, let me just tell you, the ACC is wide open. Florida State lost in week 0. Clemson gets their ass whooped in week 1. We'll get to the week 1 results for Florida State, but the ACC is wide open right now. So Virginia Tech, they go down to Vanderbilt. And I'm going to tell you, Diego Pavia, Vanderbilt, don't mess with him. 3 total touchdowns, 300 total yards. He's a great dual threat quarterback. They won 34-27 in overtime. A good win for Vanderbilt, almost an upsetting win, right? Vanderbilt, one of the weakest teams in their conference. And Virginia Tech, kind of like a West Virginia type of deal, you get cut from the top 25 in the preseason. Okay, let's try to prove it with a big week 1 win. And this would have been a good week 1 win, right? You go down to Vanderbilt and you take an away win at them. That would be pretty big. And Virginia Tech, they were getting their ass whooped at first. Then they start coming back. And then I'm pretty sure they regained the lead late in the 4th, but then Vanderbilt tied it back up, I want to say. I only watched certain clips of it. But then ultimately Vanderbilt got it done in overtime. So a big win for Vanderbilt. South Dakota State versus Oklahoma State, another kind of big FCS, FBS matchup. South Dakota State has been like the team for FCS. And I remember for them to travel to Oklahoma, who's number 17 in the country, featuring maybe the best running back in college football. For them to only be, I think at one point they were like only like a 9.5 point favorite. I'm like, you're telling me at home against an FCS, like I get it's the best FCS team, but an FCS team and you're number 17 in the country. I think it went up back to 13, and I mean it was a big win for Oklahoma. Ollie Gordon looks like one of the best running backs still. He was the other preseason first team All American. Over 100 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground, added 40 yards through the air and an additional touchdown. So a 3 touchdown performance for Ollie Gordon. Grown ass man, Alan Bowman had a game, 267 yards and 3 touchdowns. I think he's a 7-year quarterback, which I would be a 6-year in college, and I'm about to turn 24. So thinking a guy is 24, or I think he might be 25. I think I saw a post showing like he's older than like a third of the NFL starting quarterbacks. Like he's older than a significant chunk of NFL quarterbacks, and he's still playing college football. Take that as you will. Although it was a good performance, I think, for SDSU, and they might be one of the best teams in the FCS, they were no match for a Big 12 powerhouse. So a big win for Oklahoma State at their house. Next, a big one. Miami takes on Florida at the Swamp. Miami, you had a lot of expectations. They come in number 19th in the country. Florida unranked. But hey, they have a tough atmosphere to play at. And I just want to first, when I get into this, want to apologize for leaving Cam Ward off my top 10 quarterbacks list for 2024. If you guys listened to my video a couple weeks ago, I mentioned how he was an honorable mention for the top 10, and he's just not in my top 10 yet. And wow, he amazed me in that game. For him to be so calm and monotone at the Swamp, throwing for damn near 400 yards, 3 touchdowns, had a few big runs, and to lead the Hurricanes to a huge 41-17 win. I was kind of talking about how the ACC is kind of wide open. Florida State's had a rough start. Clemson has a tough away loss. Virginia Tech doesn't get their win. NC State kind of had a questionable win as well. Who's going to take the throne in the ACC? And I think right now the favorite's got to be Miami, at least in terms of just the most impressive week 1 win. You go to the Swamp in Florida, you kick their ass by 21? No, 24? 24 points. My math is right. I mean, you win by 3+ touchdowns. That's great. I think Cam Ward's going to be a Heisman candidate, just based off that performance. I was a little uncertain about the Hurricanes heading into this season, but with a win like that, if they can keep playing, they will not only move up in the rankings this week, which I'm still waiting for them to come out. I feel like last year I would always look like, well, it would usually be like Sunday morning, because usually games were just on Saturdays. But opening week, you kind of had them a little bit more scattered. But I was kind of hoping to open my phone up this morning on Tuesday and see the updated rankings. And maybe they still haven't released it yet. It's about 9 a.m. here. But Miami should certainly move up in the rankings. And if they keep winning like the way they do and playing the way they do, they'll possibly be a top 10 team in the country. Notre Dame, number 7. Takes on Texas A&M in College game day on a nice Saturday night game. And, well, it was a good battle. First half was a good defensive battle. I'm pretty sure it was like 6-6 going into halftime. But Notre Dame, they outlasted the Aggies. Might be the best secondary in college football. Notre Dame played really well. Connor, is it Wigman? Widgman? I'm really bad with names. He only went 12 for 30. So he completed less than 50% for 100 total yards and 2 interceptions. It was a poor performance for Texas A&M in the passing game. And although Riley Leonard didn't play his best, I actually feel like I should switch him to like being a top 10 honorable mention and then switch his spot with Cam Ward. It's just one game. And it's tough to go back on that. But Riley Leonard, I expected a little bit better from him. But at the same time, on the road, top 20 team, big, hard, loud environment. I get he's maybe not going to, have the best performance in the world. Anyway, so Notre Dame, they get a really impressive win. They go and beat Texas A&M 23-13. A huge road win for the Irish. Now they have a home game against Northern Illinois, which should be an easy win there. So Notre Dame off to a good start. Possible top five team. We'll get into that a little bit later. Um, then the cap off Saturday. This is not exactly a huge game, but just something I wanted to bring up. Idaho takes on number 3 Oregon. So the Ducks, I think, have the best offense, at least on paper in college football. Solid defense. I think they're going to be a contender to win the Big Ten. Not only that, but they're going to make the college football playoffs. I don't really see otherwise. However, I'm kind of like, really? So Oregon, so they host an FCS program, Idaho, University of Idaho. And, well, they won. Like, the Ducks won. But I'm a little disappointed in the score and just the outcomes. They win 24-14. I'm not sure if I'm more upset and concerned about the Ducks allowing 2 touchdowns, or if they only scored, like, not only allowing 2 touchdowns, but then you only scored 24 points. Like, you only scored 3 total touchdowns and then a field goal. And it was odd because Dylan Gabriel, I mean, he had an efficient game. He threw for 380 yards, no interceptions. I think he had like pass completion like 75%, pair of touchdowns. But one of those wasn't like till late in the fourth quarter, and I'm kind of like, you guys are at home. And I get Idaho doesn't have a super far travel to Oregon, but I'm kind of like, come on, like how do you, like how do you only beat this team by 10? I don't know what the plus minus was for that game. I mean, Oregon had to be a heavy favorite. Um, so yeah, it's a little questionable. I mean, they got the win, and a win is a win. So I like to look at the positive, but you should win by a lot more than just 10 points. I think I'm more disappointed that the offense only put up, 3 touchdowns. And you're supposed to be like the best offense in the country. Great offensive line, great receiver duo in Tez Johnson and Evan Stewart, who just, I didn't even see it all. I think he only had 3 catches. You have one of the best quarterbacks, if not maybe the best quarterback in the Big Ten, and Dylan Gabriel. Um, Definitely a disappointing win, I would say. And now it's like, well, you have to go and host Boise State. And Ashton Jeanty, the running back for Boise State, had 6 rushing touchdowns this weekend. Boise State's kind of a fringe top 25 team here. Although you have home field advantage again if you're the Ducks, but this is not a gimme. Like, I think you have to play this game hard now. At first maybe you kind of thought it was going to be a gimme, but now it's like you actually have to play well and you have to take this like really serious. And not to say they weren't taking it serious week 1 against Idaho, but take it more serious. And maybe this is what they need. Maybe this is a humbling experience, right? And they're like, you know what? We think we're great, but people can still bring us down. So now let's, whoop some ass. Maybe they'll go and, beat Boise State by like 40. Who knows? And then Sunday. So USC takes on LSU. Unfortunately, I didn't watch this game. I was at the Minnesota State Fair with my girlfriend, and that was a really fun time. And USC, they go to Baton Rouge and LSU, and I kind of think LSU is a little overrated, and then I think USC is a little underrated. So I think this was a much closer game than maybe the rankings kind of showed. And LSU, they drop a game at home. USC wins 27-20. Miller Moss with a great game. I just bumped my computer again. Oh my goodness. I don't think you guys who are just listening really noticed this, but if you're watching on YouTube or if you're watching the video on Spotify, you just noticed that again. My apologies. It's early. I don't know what I'm doing. Miller Moss had a great game for USC. I think he had 380 yards, just 1 passing touchdown. Rushing wise, they look good. I mean, a huge road win for USC. I get LSU was ranked 13th in the country, which is a bit overrated if you ask me, and I think a lot of college football followers maybe would agree to that take. Do you unrank the Tigers? you have a home loss week one. I mean, you're already a little overrated as it is, and do they get unranked? I'm not sure. But a huge win for USC. They definitely should crawl up into the top 20 after that one. I heard it was a really fun game. One of my friends' friends texted our little group chat, and he was like, USC acting like they won a playoff game. I'm guessing fans or players were pretty hyped. I mean, as they should be. You go down to LSU and, you beat them by a touchdown. It's a huge win. So congrats to the Trojans, Lincoln Riley. That's a big win to start their season. Now let's go to the Monday night game. Boston College and Florida State. I've been kind of looking forward to talking about this one. So I'm not going to sit here. I don't really talk much about sports betting. Actually, in Minnesota, it's illegal. I've been to Arizona once, and I was able to sports bet down there, and it is really fun and addicting. Like, in some ways, I'm glad it's not legal here, just because I feel like I'd be spending money that I should be spending on bills and saving up for great things. I'd be spending that on sports betting, which is not good. But it is really fun. And if I had to bet on this game, I would bet Boston College plus 16.5. I didn't think they were going to win, but Boston College goes to Florida State. Florida State had a rough week 0. They played Georgia Tech, who we'll get into a little bit as well about their performance so far. And Florida's got home field advantage. Boston College has to travel, from the top right point of the country to the bottom right point of the country. But I was like, don't doubt Thomas Castellanos, the quarterback for Boston College. He's a good dual threat guy. And I'm like, I'm not saying Boston College is going to win this game, but if I had to pick, it would be like plus 16.5 Boston College. Like, I'm projecting them to either win or lose by 16 or fewer points, if that makes sense. So I'm like, in other words, I don't think Florida State is going to win by 17 points or more. And again, I'm not trying to be like, oh, I should have taken that bet. I would have won millions. Like, no, like I probably would have thrown like $10 on that thing. But I'm just kind of happy I was right, because I was thinking, I'm like, DJU and Florida just, I don't know, they just weren't doing it. And they weren't doing it last night. I watched the game in its entirety. And my overall take is, well, for Boston College, that was a great game. Very disciplined. I think they had one penalty throughout that entire game. I didn't see like any pass interference, which was big, because I feel like you see that a lot. They won in the trenches. I mean, they ran the ball very well. It seemed like their offensive line had their way with the Florida State defensive line. And then defensively for Boston College, they were locking up a lot of guys. DJU, the quarterback for Florida State, I mean, he had well over 200 passing yards, had a touchdown, had an interception, but just something looks off with him. And it's kind of interesting to me to say that he's a year younger than me, so this is his 5th year in college. And not only to say that, this is his 5th year, but like he was like one of the best quarterbacks out of high school. And he's not playing like it. I don't know what's going on. He showed glimpses and had his moments where he made some big throws, but he just doesn't look like a quarterback who's going to win a lot of games. I don't know what's going on. There was one particular drive where Florida State was in the red zone, and he had like a couple wide open touchdown throws, and he just like missed them. Like, and I can't knock on him too much. Some of the wide receivers in Florida State were just dropping the ball. Like, he actually made a good throw, and they were dropping it. So I'm not gonna, flame him too much, but there were some big plays in that game where he needed to make that throw. And if he made that throw, it would have been a touchdown. It was a drawn-up play. It was great. They had the chance, but they had to settle for the field goal. And Boston College, there were moments where Boston College didn't play a perfect game, but for them to go on the road to, the preseason rankings are still in effect, a top 10 team in the country, that's a great win for the program. But what does that mean for Florida State? They start 0-2. You lose to a mid-tier ACC program that now I'm kind of like, because Georgia Tech won their second game. So I'm kind of like, well, they're 2-0. Do you rank Georgia Tech? Um, but regardless, at first I was kind of like, well, do you unrank Florida State after their week one loss or week zero loss against Georgia Tech? I'm like, no. Now you have a home loss against Boston College. And I'm like, Boston College by no means is a ranked top 25 team, but they're a solid program. You can't just take that game lightly. And you lose at home, I mean, you have to unrank the Seminoles. They are not a top 25 team. You lose to Georgia Tech, and then you kind of get your ass whooped by Boston College at home. A really tough loss for Florida State. So that's my game recap. Well, now let's kind of go into my takeaways and then kind of questions I'm going to ask myself. All right, my first takeaway. Georgia looks great. They should remain number one heading into week two. Iowa, the Hawkeyes, their offense exists. They beat Illinois State by 40 points. They shut them out 40-0. So not only was it a great defensive performance, but the offense actually got some stuff going on. I remember kind of thinking, like, I saw they were like a 23-point favorite, I think it was. And I was like, wow, that doesn't seem like much. But then I kind of forget, I'm like, oh, it's Iowa's offense. They're not great at all. Like, they were really bad last year. And I'm like, Vegas is projecting them to basically, like, score 3 touchdowns and then not let up anything. So they actually existed. McNamara, the quarterback for Iowa, had a pretty solid performance. Ohio State's Jeremiah Smith, starting wide receiver as a true freshman, is the real deal. He might be the best freshman in college football. 6 catches, 90 yards, 2 touchdowns. I get it was against Akron. Not going to say that's a fierce opponent. But for a true freshman on his college football debut to, rack up almost 100 yards and have 2 touchdowns, I mean, that's really impressive. I'm going to give credit where credit is due. A big game for Jeremiah Smith. Now people are saying, well, I've kind of heard speculation like the talk is Emeka Mbuka is kind of overrated and he's kind of their wide receiver one. Would it be possible if Jeremiah Smith overcomes and is the true wide receiver one in Ohio State as a true freshman over a guy who's going to go to the NFL next year? Pretty crazy. A lot of big things for the freshman. Travis Hunter out of Colorado is him. Great performance, 3 touchdowns, over 100 yards. Was playing well at cornerback as well. He's great. Now let's see how he does against Big 12 opponents, but he should remain elite. Shedeur Sanders is also great. Threw for over 400 yards, 4 passing touchdowns. I think Colorado should remain a pass-heavy, pass-first type of offense. Miami had a great week 1. Are they the favorites to win the ACC right now? And are they a top 10 opponent? I think right now you have to say they're the favorites to win the ACC. Florida State 0-2. I'm sorry, but I don't think it's happening. Not only do you have 2 conference losses, but they're 2 teams that you really were expected to beat. So yeah, I think Florida State, unfortunately, with the bad start, I mean, the way they're playing, even if they do recover, I'm not sure if they're going to win the ACC. But based off week 1 performance, Clemson dropped a loss to Georgia. I think you got to give it to Miami, a road win at the Swamp against Florida. The Gators, they're going to have a long season. Their starting quarterback also got injured, and you lost your first home opener. So the Gators, it's going to be a long, rough season. But Miami, they should enter themselves into the top 15, potentially top 10 heading into week 2. And if they keep playing the way they do, they're going to be the favorites to win the ACC and make the college football playoffs. Should we not underestimate Ole Miss? They beat Furman by 76. They won 76-0. I mean, that is just a brutal win. Brutal performance by Furman. I mean, Jackson Dart looked phenomenal. Him and Trey Harris, a great quarterback wide receiver duo. I think Ole Miss is my dark horse to win the national championship, I would say. Don't get me wrong, it'll probably be Georgia or Ohio State, maybe Texas, maybe Oregon, maybe Alabama. I've been hearing some things about Notre Dame, Penn State too. But 76 points? Then you allow 0? I mean, that is 10 touchdowns. Like, that is 10 offensive touchdowns. Or I don't know I think they were all offense, but that's 10 touchdowns. That's incredible to me. And I think I've seen stats showing that teams, I think, haven't like teams who win a national championship have been preseason top six, and Ole Miss is number six. So they're my dark horse to win it. If they keep playing the way they do, I mean, I'm not saying they're going to win the SEC, but I think they'll get a good seed in the college football playoffs, and they're definitely poised to win. Um, how far should Oregon move down in the rankings, if at all? And if so, would they be outside the top five? So we talked a little bit earlier about Oregon has a 10-point win at home to Idaho, and you're number three in the country. Kind of a disappointing win. I'm not sure if they're going to move down. I feel like they should because like teams have way better wins like behind them. Like Texas beat Colorado State by a shit ton at home. Alabama won their big first game. Ole Miss had an ass whooping, and then it's like, well, Notre Dame went to Texas A&M and won by 10, and then Penn State went to West Virginia and won, and then who's number 9? Michigan. Michigan's not going to be top 5. I think they're outside the top 10. They had a questionable win against Fresno State. But I think right now, I mean, based off that week 1 performance, Oregon should be outside the top 5. But also, I would totally get it if they weren't and they remained at number 3 in the country. I still believe they're one of the best in the countries, and I think they should bounce back. And then is Notre Dame top 5? With that win, yes. But I don't think they're any higher than 5 if they choose to get ranked that high. I think Michigan's overrated. Offensively, they were, not looking great. And I understand, Michigan's one of those teams, like, they're probably going to have the most first-round draft picks out of any team this season. Will Johnson, Mason Graham, possibly Donovan Edwards, Kenneth Grant for defense. So I get that point of it, but Michigan, I mean, they lost so many guys. Like, they just lost so much depth and just other solid guys. They have their big name players, but a lot of guys are going to have to step up who, didn't get too much action from a season ago. I think Michigan, Fresno State has to travel, from California to Michigan. And although they're a decent team, Michigan needs to win that game more by 20. And offensively, they didn't look anything stellar. For the Arizona Wildcats, Fafita and McMillan, I think, is the best quarterback wide receiver duo. A phenomenal performance. They play New Mexico. Defensively, I will say the Wildcats kind of scare me. We'll see how well they do in the Big 12. Defensively, I think their offense is going to basically have to be the side of the ball that really wins them games. But they can definitely do it. I mean, they dropped 61 points. No Fafita. People were not having him as a top 10 quarterback. I'm like, I have him in my top 10 as just a sophomore. 400 plus yards. He had 422 yards, 4 touchdowns. And then McMillan, their big wide receiver, 10 catches, 304 yards, and 4 touchdowns. I mean, that is an amazing performance. That is 64 fantasy points. If you play fantasy football, PPR, of course. That is amazing. I mean, he had a tremendous game. I think he broke the school record. He had to. I mean, 304 yards. That's pretty incredible. 4 touchdowns as well. I mean, that's got to be the best quarterback wide receiver duo, at least through week 1. Amazing performance for the Wildcats and their offense. And then with that, I kind of expected more from the other elite quarterback wide receiver duo in Brady Cook and Luther Burden out of Missouri. Luther Burden, I think, is the best wide receiver in football. However, with a big win against Murray State, he only had 3 catches for 39 yards. He did get a receiving touchdown. Brady Cook had an okay performance, 19 for 30 through the air, 218 yards and a touchdown. I'm not concerned about Missouri overall. I've heard thoughts they should be a top 10 team, and right now, just based off the passing, I don't know if I believe it. I don't know, but we'll see. And then is Georgia Tech, who should be a team that's in the top 25? Is it Georgia Tech? You have a win against number 10 Florida State, and then another win. Was it Georgia Southern? I'm pretty sure they played. Was it Georgia Southern? Oh, God, I'm getting my teams mixed up. Well, now they have to go off to Syracuse and play. I think they're a favorite for now. I mean, if they're not ranked this week and they go to Syracuse and win that game, I think they should be ranked. Is Boston College going to be ranked? You go to Florida State and win? I don't know. We're going to see. I want to check and see real quick. if the college football rankings are updated. Please be updated. I'm really banking on this. They're usually like the committee's good about getting this stuff out. Sorry to keep you guys waiting. No, it's not. It's just not. It's just a preseason. Damn. Well, that's okay. We can end it here. Well, that's my week 1 recap for college football. Tune in later this week, either Friday or hopefully Thursday, but probably Friday of this week for the week 2 preview. Big things to come. We got another couple player interviews scheduled. We're going to be collabing with a big college football content creator in the near future. So I'm really excited for that. It's going to be a good time for the inside scoop. So yeah, if you made it this far, thanks for listening. Have a blessed day, everyone, and I'll talk to y'all later.